who are present with us this morning, members of the listening and viewing public, a very good morning to you. I am Dr. Lakram Bodo, the Member of Parliament for Faizabad and the Shadow for Health, and with me this morning is my parliamentary colleague, Senator Damian Lyder, who is our Shadow for Trade and Industry. We say a special welcome and we thank you for joining us at our weekly opposition media briefing. We also want to take this opportunity to wish Trinidad and Tobago a happy independence. This morning, we wish to address a few matters regarding health, especially with regards to vaccination and other issues, as well as some issues in the trade and industry sector. As you know, the government used its majority in Parliament last Wednesday to extend the state of emergency for a further 3 months, saying that this extension was necessary to continue the fight against COVID-19. This is no doubt going to have a further devastating impact on businesses and livelihoods, and my colleague, Senator Lyder, will deal with that in a few minutes. This morning we are calling upon the government to account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we are not talking about financial accounting. We will deal with that in the upcoming budget debate. We are calling on the government to account to the population with regards to a comprehensive plan for fighting COVID-19. We are now 18 months into this pandemic, and already many countries around the globe have accepted that they have to live with the pandemic and have rolled out certain measures. Our question this morning is this: what is this government's plan to allow us to survive, knowing that the virus will be with us for some time to come? Surely it cannot be lockdown after lockdown only. So we call on them to give some sort of timelines to the population. The population is beginning to feel hopeless, especially when the only time to get some form of clarity and direction is at weekly press conferences. Therefore, we are asking the government to tell us what can we expect in the next few months. Tell us at what number of COVID cases you will allow further opening up of the economic and recreational spaces, for example, in-house dining and beaches. At what level of cases will it decrease the curfew hours and eventually end the state of emergency? Or is it going to be the same wait-and-see game with no clearly defined action points, with decisions being announced somewhat arbitrarily at Saturday press conferences? Trinidad and Tobago has an intelligent population, and unless we get an idea of the government's comprehensive plan to fight this pandemic, there will continue to be mistrust, a high level of vaccine hesitancy, and I will speak about this shortly, and the population will not take the government seriously, which would essentially mean that we are not going anywhere anytime soon. Whilst this approach may have been acceptable in the early days of the pandemic, when data was limited and vaccines were not available, we are now in a position where surely the government can share some comprehensive plan as to how our beloved country is expected to move forward. We stand close to 45,000 confirmed cases and just under 1,300 deaths, with daily numbers averaging just under 300, down from the large numbers that we had in May, June, and July. And I just want, of course, to express condolences to the family and loved ones of those we have lost, and again to thank those who are battling on the front line against this COVID-19 pandemic. I am not for one moment saying that we should let our guard down and facilitate reckless or irresponsible behavior. I am not saying that we should take our eyes off the limited capacity of our healthcare system, especially with the threat of the deadly Delta variant lurking nearby. But let us not forget that many of our non-COVID patients continue to suffer whilst waiting for urgent treatment at our hospitals. And this is a particularly neglected group, and I wanted to pay attention to this. Whilst we are in the fortunate situation of having separate facilities to treat COVID-19 patients, the Minister of Health fails to tell us that staff from the regular healthcare system, especially anesthetists, internal medicine doctors, and specialist nurses, are deployed to the parallel healthcare system, leaving the regular healthcare system in need and with less resources to treat non-COVID patients. So this rosy picture of parallel healthcare systems running smoothly, often painted by the Minister of Health, is a myth that will be more closely examined in the upcoming budget debate, when we get the opportunity to examine the government's expenditure on the health sector and what citizens have received or not received for it. Many of you have had your eye surgeries postponed while your sight worsens. Many of you cannot see your doctors in the clinics for proper examinations to know if your diabetes or hypertension or heart disease or kidney condition is worsening. So I am saying that we need plans from the government, not only to treat with the economic fallout, which my colleague will deal with from this pandemic, but also to stem the impending collapse of the regular health system. This is something that has gone unnoticed or not spoken about by the government, but certainly the citizens are bearing the brunt of it. So we await the answers from the Minister of Health and the government on this issue. Moving on now to the issue of vaccinations and vaccine acceptance. At yesterday's press conference, the Prime Minister expressed dismay and disappointment at the fact that only 28% of the population was fully vaccinated and about 36% had received their first dose. We are now in the situation where the government, having initially stumbled on their efforts to procure vaccines, now have in their possession over 1.52 million dose vaccines and over 100,000 single-dose vaccines, enough to fully vaccinate over 950,000 persons. Yesterday, we were told at the Prime Minister's press conference that only just over 390,000 persons have been fully vaccinated, which represents 28% of our population, far short of the 70 to 80% required for herd immunity. Members of the media, this is a very disturbing situation, and I want to quote to you from an article from AZP News written by Suzanne Weo, and this article came about on February 7th, 2021. Yes, February 7, 2021. And the article, the headline is, UWI survey, 62% of trainees won't take COVID-19 vaccine. And as I said, this is in AZP News, February 7, 2021. So the article goes on to state, the majority of citizens in Trinidad and Tobago are still not comfortable with the idea of accepting a COVID-19 vaccine. This even though vaccines will be approved by the World Health Organization. And this article was written based on an event that took place, a joint event between the Faculty of Medicine at the University of the West Indies and the Ministry of Health, at which the Minister of Health himself attended and spoke. Essentially, what is being said here is that a survey was done of 1,100 respondents, and that indicated that 62% will not accept the vaccine, whilst 37% stated that they will accept the vaccine, as stated by Dr. Sa of the Faculty of Medical Sciences. So this is quite interesting that this information was available to the government way back in February of 2021. And where are we now? We are looking at the same figures, where we have gone from a vaccine vacuum where we had no vaccines to now we have a wall where we have vaccine hesitancy. The article further goes on to state, and this is actually very interesting, that the purpose of the survey was to determine vaccine acceptance and to prepare recommendations to the Ministry of Health that can strengthen its pro-vaccination strategy. So of course this study was meant to help the Ministry of Health, and the survey was conducted from December 27, 2020 to January 11, 2021. Now the main reason participants gave for not wanting to take the vaccine were concerns with safety with the vaccine. Other reasons include concerns with vaccine effectiveness, rush timelines, and most importantly, lack of trust. And I think this lack of trust speaks a whole lot to what is happening now in the country with regards to vaccine hesitancy. And this is something that needs to be addressed. And one has to ask the question whether the government has truly garnered the trust of the people going forward so that they may continue to take the vaccines. The respondents also give recommendations. One of the recommendations was that general knowledge and vaccine awareness campaigns should be launched by the health authorities. So, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, this government had fair warning of this impending vaccine hesitancy, and it appears that they did very little to address it while we were waiting for the vaccines to arrive. Instead, It appears that they allowed fake news, false information, and many pseudoscientists to lead the narrative and to create doubt in the minds of many of our citizens, hence the reason for such high level of vaccine hesitancy. Therefore, I ask, where is the Ministry of Communications in all of this? What is the role of the Ministry and the Minister of Communication? What role are they playing in this pandemic? To not only promote vaccination, but to debunk the false information. Other studies have shown that in this vaccine hesitancy situation, citizens have more trust in scientists and healthcare workers than politicians. But now the government is resorting to blaming citizens and threatening what could turn out to be discriminatory measures in schools and even in the workplace. So they seem to be continuously operating by trial and error, and that is unacceptable to the population at this stage. Weeks after the vaccine rollout for the children in the 12 to 18 age group, we are now told that only 22,000 children have been vaccinated, with school about to open, or should be open, we were promised in September. Now the government has decided to use the schools to increase the uptake, a measure announced yesterday, and a measure which could have been used from the very beginning to increase the rollout of vaccination amongst our nation's children. So whatever communication strategy the government has used so far has failed and needs urgent review if we are to reach the required herd immunity. As I close, I again call upon the government to share the plan that will allow us to live with the virus while simultaneously protecting lives and livelihoods. It can no longer be one or the other. Other countries have learned that a zero COVID-19 positive situation is not easily achievable and have had to make bold and innovative policy decisions to ensure the very survival of their citizens and economies. The question is this government capable of making such steps? We in the United National Congress will continue to play our part in this battle. The leader of the opposition has publicly appealed to parents to have their children vaccinated. Every one of our members of parliament is doing his or her bit to ensure that their constituents are vaccinated. My colleagues from Oropuch East and Kumoto Manzilina have done their own bits in terms of facilitating the rollout of the vaccinations. I myself have endorsed and supported the effort for pregnant women to get vaccinated in my own area of specialty, and currently I'm involved in the role of the Johnson & Johnson project in Faizabad. So, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, we are in this together. We will have to get out of this with the support of each other. As I close, I say, let us remember to wash our hands, wear our masks, watch our distance, and take our vaccines. I thank you. I now move on and hand over to my colleague, Senator Damian Lyda, who will speak on issues in the trade sector, and then we will take questions following his presentation.
Thank you, MP Bodu, and I say good morning to members of the media and to the listening population, listening on to social media, YouTube, Facebook. I say to you good morning at a not so good time. Today being August the 29th, 2021, the nation remains under a state of emergency with curfew restrictions in place between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. This situation is one that presents significant challenge, especially for the business community and business operators such as retailers and manufacturers in this country. There are other general challenges that these retailers and manufacturers face today, but this extended SOE simply compounds the already existing challenges. As a senator, I would have raised several issues, both in the Senate and outside the Senate in various press conferences. Issues that affect the small and medium-sized businesses here today. Therefore, the very first thing that I would like to do this morning is call on the government. You want to extend the state of emergency. At least listen to the private sectors and civil society and extend the curfew time to 12 o'clock. And I will get into that, midnight to 5 a.m. You see, these curfew restrictions impact manufacturing. They impact the retail sector. And I emphasize with the reported thousands of retailers who will either not reopen after the state of emergency, who are thinking not to reopen, or who will face further losses and by the end of the 3 months will not reopen. Thousands of retailers, manufacturers, and thousands of employees going home on the breadline. You see, there are many of those who have closed and holding on. Now with 3 additional months of curfew, many of these retailers and manufacturers who are barely holding on, who are sitting in hope to see the government remove this draconian state of emergency. Many of them now, thousands of these businesses, can no longer last even 1 more month of hemorrhaging their savings, let alone 3 more months in the state of emergency. With all hopes dissolved by a simple majority, by a PNM controlled parliament, many of them are now moving swiftly to close their operations and to stop the hemorrhaging of their own life savings. This is the reality we're faced with today. A reality where thousands of businesses have been shut, thousands of households have lost their life savings, and thousands of employees are now on the breadline. One only has to look at the report given by the Minister of Finance on NIS contributions to see that more than 113,000 persons have dropped off from contributing towards NIS. This is a clear indication of job loss in the formal sector, let alone the informal sector, where those numbers are not recorded. So we could see as much as 200,000 persons on the breadline now, when we consider both the formal and informal sector. As an opposition senator, I receive calls on a daily basis from persons and families requesting help to simply to survive, from business colleagues who are asking for small loans to get them through this time because the banks won't even lend them given the state of their balance sheets. So we in the opposition have heard their cries, and that is why we are calling on the government to increase the time to midnight to 5 a.m. for the curfew. Ladies and gentlemen, even the various chambers of commerce representatives are clamoring to the government now and pleading that even in the case of an unjustified state of emergency, at least reduce the curfew hours. It was Gabriel Farrier of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce is reported having expressed difficulty on the 20th of August with the hours of the curfew. He stated that when hours of activity are restricted, herding is created and called an extended time for movement. And we see this when we see employees racing to get home from their jobs and bunching up in supermarkets, hardwares and pharmacies on their way home, creating yet again another super spreader event. Local manufacturers, according to Farrier, typically operate in shifts between 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then a second shift between 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So he called for a midnight to 5 a.m. curfew to accommodate a second shift, citing further that manufacturers are forced to close their doors at between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. to facilitate staff reaching home before the 9 p.m. curfew. It was Diane Haddad from the Tobago Chamber who, so our sister Isle, is also reported on the very same day, on the 20th of August 2021. And I quote Mrs. Haddad, "The fact is that we don't know that the lockdown is serving any purpose now other than stifling people and frustrating people who have been locked down for a very long time." She questions the claim that the economy is open back up, yet we are extending a state of emergency. Mrs. Haddad points to the abundant supply of vaccines, which is a contradiction, again, to an extended state of emergency. She also made a call for government to set a date for herd immunity. I heard my colleague also call for a date. These are just two members of many respected members of various chambers of commerce throughout the length and breadth of this country. Yet the government on Wednesday the 25th of August failed to bring a convincing argument to the nation as to why they should have extended this state of emergency. There was absolutely no science, and they failed to take into account the cries of the citizens of this country as well as the cries of the private sector and civil society. Let me remind the government here today that as the private sector is integral to our society. They support the government's expenditure by paying taxes to the state to ensure that the government can meet with the bills through tax revenue, especially at a time when we are facing this economic decline. It is the private sector that is holding this country together and now helping this economy to avoid collapse from this Keith Rowley administration. In October 2020, the government estimated 41.36 billion in revenue for the year. And then at the midterm, we heard the Minister of Finance indicate to the population and to the citizens that we had a $2.5 billion shortfall in revenue. What this means in layman's terms, ladies and gentlemen, is the government is bringing in less revenue via taxes from the energy and the non-energy sector. The curfew extension will not help in this tax revenue collection, as business activities will continue to become subdued. These manufacturers already have the challenges of not being paid their VAT refunds on a timely basis. They have the challenges of global factors such as increased freight rates, such as delays in shipments of raw materials. They have all of these things to contend with. Yet we see our government worsen their situation by extending this draconian state of emergency. We must remind the government that Trinidad and Tobago is about to enter its peak season of sales as we draw close to Diwali and Christmas. So this 9 to 5 a.m. curfew is placed under a state of emergency that will end in November, in the heart of the peak season. This limits manufacturers from getting to their capacity, from manufacturing to supply the requirement, the demands of a reopening economy. Furthermore, the continued curfew restrictions over the next 3 months will make it difficult for manufacturers also to respond to the increased demand of goods and services from a reopening export market, regionally and internationally. Trinidad and Tobago, which was one of the leading countries in export in this region, can now be thrown into the shadows of countries such as Jamaica, Dominican Republic, even Barbados and Guyana, as it pertains to growth in exports. It has now become either impossible or unfeasible for a manufacturer or a retailer to run a second shift now. Given that manufacturers and retailers have to close by 6 to 6:30 p.m. so that workers can get home by 9 p.m., it is now practically impossible. The government will come to you and tell you that they've made provisions to provide exemption passes for manufacturers. But I want to ask the government if they are not aware that there are thousands of workers on the factory floor that don't have the luxury of having their own vehicle and depend upon public transport to get to and from the workplace. So that is why they have to leave at 6:30 in order to get home. So it will not be feasible for manufacturers to organize private transportation to get the thousands of workers throughout the length and breadth of the country. So what is going to be the result of this extended state of emergency as it pertains to manufacturers and retailers in this country? Less revenue and profits to help these manufacturers and retailers survive during these hard times. Less employment for persons who depend upon a second shift for their income, and as such, less money circulating in the economy. Thirdly, less revenue to government via taxes, lending to further shortfalls, and the need for the government to increase in borrowing. That has been the mantra of this government: borrow, borrow, borrow. And for our exporters, less US dollars coming into our country, increased cost of manufacturing and production, and becoming more and more uncompetitive on the international market. And fifthly, workers' productivity declining because of worker stress increasing, having to worry about getting home and avoiding these draconian fines by not getting home by 9 p.m. So from 5, 6 o'clock, their mindset is already on how do we get out of the workplace to get to the pharmacy, to get to the supermarket, to get home to their families. And we empathize with them in this regard. You see, the government has shown us over the last 6 years their lack of interest in the retail and manufacturing sector. One only has to look at the data provided by the central bank to see that between 2015 to 2019, non-energy exports declined by 32% and worsened again by 2020. The decline in non-energy exports by 2020 was 39% from 2015. All exports declined by 49% from 2015 to 2020 and by 25% from 2015 to 2019. So the government cannot continue blaming the COVID pandemic for the decline in manufacturing, the decline in exports, the decline in our economy. So these significant declines in exports and non-energy exports in particular exposes the failure of this government to transform the economy. The government boasted in the 2020 budget that manufacturing, among others, was going to be that pillar of diversification out of the energy sector. But yet we see a free fall from 2015 to now. This decline in exports puts a risk to the capacity of this economy to generate the much needed foreign exchange. The government has not been able to find a solution to deal with the declining foreign reserves. And let me remind the population that net official reserves had been on the decline since 2015, falling from $10.459 billion when the People's Partnership led by Kamala Prasad demitted office, to now $6.649 billion as of July 2021. Such a solution could have been found in supporting the export markets. However, when we have to shut down export earners like Petrotrin, ArcelorMittal, and 1/3 of the Point Lisas estate, it's no surprise that this Keith Rowley-led administration has no plan to turn around the fortunes of the export sector. Ladies and gentlemen, the government took to the media on Tuesday the 24th of August, this week, celebrating the allocation of $644 million from the International Monetary Fund. And I want to take this opportunity today to especially thank the IMF for rescuing this government with these US funds, temporarily at least. However, what is the true test is whether or not the private sector will benefit from this windfall. Will the supply of foreign exchange to a desperate private sector be bolstered by this $644 million US, or will it be used, as this government has been doing, to pay our mounting foreign debt, or to continue spending money on vanity projects? It's left to be seen. But I will put the government on notice that as a businessman, I will be looking at access to US over the next couple of months. I will be in line with everyone else. You see, ladies and gentlemen, many of these businesses today face liquidity problems in order to survive here today. With their depleted savings in the past year and a half from all these start and stops, and with the latest lockdown breaching the balance sheets of many of these businesses, one would think that this government would assist these businesses to survive. Other countries, in recognition of this sort of decline throughout the world, have done things for the business sector, sector-specific grants. We just have to look in the United Kingdom, where they roll out a $5 billion scheme for high street and hospitality firms in their budget to assist. Yet we have a government that has dropped the ball on sector-specific support for retailers and manufacturers who have been adversely affected by the pandemic and by these state of emergency shutdowns. So in general, grants to ailing businesses would have been a better use of taxpayers' funds than spending on some of these vanity projects we've seen in the last couple of years. Yet for many, liquidity remains a challenge. Though many of them may be closed now and some may be open, due to a lack of liquidity, we may see over the next 3 months many more businesses falling off and falling out of our economy. So I urge the government to consider increasing grants, wage subsidies to many of these ailing businesses. But what they can do what they can do to assist, especially manufacturers today, is to pay the VAT refunds on a timely basis. You see, it is the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber 3 months ago, on May the 21st, had a cause to highlight the government's failure in ensuring that they pay much needed VAT refunds on a timely basis. These very manufacturers who are now struggling through the state of emergency. When domestic manufacturers are owed VAT refunds, the burden of supply falls upon them. These are facts that have been screamed out and shouted out by the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association. They continue to plead with the government to provide what is their due. These refunds would be vital to companies seeking to reopen. The persistence of this government in withholding VAT refunds from businesses borders on negligence, especially at a time when they need it the most. At least it is an injustice meted out to the private sector, who are called upon to keep workers employed during this COVID-19 pandemic and during this state of emergency. But the government is not giving them their just due. It is almost as though the Minister of Finance withholds these VAT refunds as a non-interest loan to the government from these businesses. I wonder if that's the case. I would ask that question. And then the Minister of Finance comes to us in a finance bill earlier in July to bring clause 16, which provides a waiver of interest and penalties should businesses come out and pay their VAT and taxes on time. So I ask myself the very same question, that in much the same way that the government has provided an amnesty to collect their taxes, does not the private sector deserve to have their VAT refunds paid on a timely basis? Pay them so they can pay you and keep their businesses afloat and keep employees employed. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I come to a close, the Prime Minister doubling down on the state of emergency extension and this draconian curfew between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. demonstrates that they are not interested in supporting economic activity and the preservation of livelihoods. Now, let me make something clear. The government continues to talk about saving lives, and we agree that they must save lives, but they must also save livelihoods, because these two factors are interrelated. They are connected. Livelihoods save lives, because God knows there will be many persons dying from stress-related diseases due to losing their businesses, losing their life savings, losing employment, losing their homes, not being able to feed their family. There are many persons that can die due to this. So you cannot simply turn your back on livelihoods. You must take that seriously. We in the opposition continue to champion the cause of the private sector to ensure that they can play their role in national development, and as such remind the government of the following. We say to the government, take the advice of the private sector and civil society groups and limit the curfew hours between midnight and 5 a.m. This will help these companies to survive. This will help employees to maintain and keep jobs. This will help to build back this economy. Secondly, we ask that the government take a more serious position on increasing wage subsidies, as well as grants to SMEs, both in the formal and informal sector. Thirdly, we want the government to take a serious and well-planned approach with all stakeholder ministries to improve on the ease of doing business in this country, which we have seen decline in the past 6 years, where we stood at 66 in the world to now 105 in the world and climbing. And finally, we ask that the government pay these manufacturers and these businesses back their VAT refunds on a timely basis. Give back to them what is their due. These VAT refunds don't belong to the government. So, in the end, what do we expect to see from this state of emergency? Well, I can tell you, based on the last 3 months, we don't expect to see a drastic decline in the deaths and COVID positive cases. But what we do expect is to see a drastic exodus of businesses who are shutting down by the hundreds, if not thousands. And we expect to see many more persons becoming unemployed in this country, losing their jobs due to this extended, unjustified, and draconian state of emergency. Though my words seem negative, at least I would like to say to the nation who are listening on, I wish you a very happy Independence Day coming up. Enjoy the time off, and let's come all together. Private sector, civil society, the opposition, we all come together to work together to call this government to account, to ask for this government to do better as it pertains to this state of emergency, do better for our economy. We stand unified with the private sector on this point, and I thank you.
Mr. Babu, as it relates to vaccine hesitancy, you spoke on the issue of vaccine hesitancy, but would you say that the issue of vaccine hesitancy is a global one that many countries the world over are facing and grappling with? And what more, apart from, as you indicated, greater communicative methods, what more do you think could have or should have been done to address the issue of vaccine hesitancy?
Yeah, well, certainly it is a global problem, but of course every country will have its own issues, especially cultural issues and so on. Although the government has had some measure of advertisements on the TV and so on, what I think needs to be done is that we need to reach out at a more local level to the local leaders in the community, the religious leaders, the school principals, those in the sports organizations and so on. And we have to engage those who are already vaccinated, those leaders, and have them as advocates for their own communities. So I think that is something that needs to be done and to roll out. I think that will go a long way towards increasing the vaccine uptake.
So you don't think that the current communications campaign that is being run, where you see figures such as the Archbishop, etc., being used in the ministry's communications, you don't think that is sufficient to address the issue?
Yeah, well, I think that has its role. I think the national figures and the messages by national figures are important. But what I have noticed as a member of parliament and as a medical practitioner is that the one-to-one encounters with citizens and education on that basis can help. Sometimes sometimes it's just there's one clarification on certain issues, and they will go ahead and take their vaccines. So we need now, because of the position that we are in, to get to that point where we can have more almost one-to-one communication to try and convert those. So it's not there are very few, and I'm hoping I'm correct about this, who will not take a vaccine. I think what happens is you have those the group that is watching and waiting, and they can be convinced. So I think we have to move in that direction.
And a two-pronged question, Dr. Babu. As it relates to the figures, now you indicated, and the figures the ministry's updates would have indicated.
Yes.
We have more than 390,000 fully vaccinated, and we have over 503,000 people who are partially vaccinated. As that stands, given global vaccination rates, we see in Jamaica that about 4.8% of that population is fully vaccinated. How would you then, in that context, place Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, well,
you say that?
Yeah, well, the thing about this is that we really have to look at our own particular situation. While it's important, and it's good to compare the countries and so on, I think our own citizens, our own population, will want to know what is happening here. Yes. So, and of course, our concern is that with the arrival of the Delta variant, and we have this gap where the virus continues to spread and to mutate.
Yes.
And in fact, there would have been the observation recently in the media by one doctor that perhaps in this situation we could even have a Trinidad variant arising.
Yes.
So I think it's very, very important that we close that gap. Yes. And I think it can be done, with the extended effort of the government. I don't think it's impossible. I don't believe that 60% of our population refuse to be vaccinated. I just think that we have to reach out to them in a more meaningful way. We have to engage them perhaps in a different way.
And Dr. Badu, a three-part question. Now, you mentioned the Delta variant, and we've seen in larger populations where some doctors are recommending that the percentage for herd immunity actually be increased. Some are saying as far as up to 90%. Given that, do you think that we might now be looking at Trinidad and Tobago having to increase its percentage for herd immunity as a result? And as indicated, we are now seeing as well that the government has taken the position of allowing fully vaccinated students to return to classrooms come October 1st. What is the opposition's position on that?
Well, with regards to the number for herd immunity, in fact, I think the Chief Medical Officer has already spoken to looking at 80% when the initial conversation was 70%, and I'm sure as the situation evolves, it's very fluid, very dynamic, that number could go up, perhaps even cross 80%. With regards to the school population, and again, I'm disappointed by the fact that we've had over 300,000 Pfizer vaccines which were allocated to the student population, and we've had the time in the month of August, and yet we're in a situation where I believe just over 20,000 students have been vaccinated, amounting to 25% of the school population. And therefore, really and truly, we should not have been put in a position where we have to make those sort of choices. Again, it is entirely up to the government to decide how they will treat with the matter. Of course, we are all for the safety and whatever works best, for the safety of the students and the parents, But of course, it's important that we try to get our students back in terms of face-to-face learning as quickly as possible.
Mr. Leiter, as it relates to the call for the extended curfew hours, we know that one argument posits that if there is that extension of the curfew hour, that you might see that greater congregation of people, which goes against the very principle of fighting COVID. What is your take on that in terms of addressing that particular argument as it relates to the business interest?
Well, first of all, we have a health ordinance that was presented by the government that deals with these sort of things, that deals with ZESA parties or deals with people congregating together, and it is up to the protective services of this country to enforce those rules that are in the health ordinance. At the same point in time, the government should not punish manufacturers and businesses who have been following all protocols, who have been ensuring that they promote vaccination, that they put in all the health protocols within their establishment, and they're following the rules. So why should the business community and manufacturers, retailers, and so on suffer? Why must the economy suffer? Why must employees through the length of the breadth of this country lose their jobs because of a few ZESA parties that can be dealt with by simply the protective services dealing with the rules that fall under the health ordinance?
And Mr. Leiter, in terms of, we've seen some business owners express that even though you have that opening up within the retail sector, that business remains slow. What do you think the effect is going to be on the economy given the further extension of the SoE? I know you spoke to it directly, but given what is happening, we're seeing some expected it to pick up, and some have indicated that that has not occurred. What do you think is going to be the further?
Well, I want to say that you would have heard earlier where I indicated that the report by the Minister of Finance that spoke about the reduction in contributors to the NIS, which by 113,000, and one can only imagine in the informal, that's the formal sector, one can only imagine in the informal sector, some of those bars, some of those places that are not on the grid, many thousands more will be unemployed. This means that there's less liquidity, less money circulating in the system. to shop in retail outlets, supermarkets, pharmacies. So with this mass amount of unemployment we're seeing now, it's par for the course. You will expect to see a decline in businesses throughout the country. And what I can say to you is that, for us to reverse this, it cannot be a partial reopening of retail where they have to now close their doors at 6 p.m. Remember, there are pharmacies, supermarkets, there are vendors at the side of the road that make an income, especially these vendors that make an income. There are restaurants, and you are causing these companies to shut their doors at 6. You've completely destroyed the opportunity for an evening business, right? So there's it's obvious that we will see a decline. This is why we're calling for a reduction of the hours from midnight, so that those people who make this evening income and that help to employ people, that circulates money around the economy, we're asking that they are given a fair chance to survive as well. This is why we see the reduction. The retailers will tell you they have less hours to operate.
Now, in terms of the phrase lives and livelihoods have become quite popular in our vernacular, given all that is happening with COVID. And we've seen as well the Delta, or the effects that the Delta variant is having globally. If the economy were to fully reopen, don't you think that might be risky in terms of balancing lives and livelihoods? If we were to have that greater circulation of people moving about with the Delta variant lurking in the background.
Right. So as I'm not a medical doctor, but what I have seen, maybe Dr. Bodo can speak about the efficacy of vaccination that against the Delta variant. There's some experience with that, and I think Dr. Bodo, you can agree that maybe you could talk about the experience of the vaccination with the Delta variant. And I would say that should the government had moved sooner, like the rest of the world, like the rest of the region, to vaccinate their population, take the opportunity of the gifts that were being provided and not consider it as begging, and to take the opportunity from the private sector who were prepared to assist with vaccines at that time. Should the government have moved earlier to vaccinate the population and get us quicker to herd immunity, Dr. Bodo will explain the efficacy. I am certain that with health protocols, with the 3 Ws, with all that is put in place by the public health ordinance, we could have safely reopened our country with some measure of caution, like we are seeing in many other countries today. We have to live with this COVID-19 pandemic. It's not going away anywhere soon. So we have to learn to live with it. Because if we continue to simply look at lives, and we're not stating at all that lives are the most important thing. But what happens when livelihoods are crushed in an economy? What happens to the lives of people at that point in time? Dr. Bodo, you might be able to talk about the efficacy of the vaccines as it pertains to the Delta variant.
Sure. Well, let me answer that question by asking a question. What happens 3 months from now when the state of emergency comes to an end and we have the same numbers? Do we continue a state of emergency? Do we continue a lockdown? And I don't think that any country in the world now is operating like that, because we understand that we have to live with the virus. It's going to be here. It's here to stay, and therefore we have to look at the tools and the measures we have in place. Now we have the public health ordinance. We have some good measures in place that is treating with that. There's really no way that you can absolutely stop spread. There's going to be some amount of spread. We have to accept the fact that we'll have a certain minimum number of cases going forward, and we'll have to learn to live with that. But of course, the most important tool that we have at our disposal is the vaccines. And now we have the numbers, and therefore this issue of rolling out the vaccines in a timely manner, and I want to say in a timely manner again. Yeah. So the national effort has to be directed to roll out these vaccines in a very timely manner, because it's not a matter of saying, listen, we have the vaccines. The two constraining factors. One is the expiration dates. We know the Pfizer expiration date, the minister has mentioned, is going to be in November. So one is the expiration date. But the other is that the longer you allow the virus to remain in the population, in an unvaccinated population, the greater the risk of spread. So I think it's imperative that this vaccine rollout takes place. Now, in terms of the efficacy, we know that the majority of the vaccines, we have here about 3 or 4 different vaccines, the majority of them will give you an efficacy of somewhere between 70, some of them up to 80, 90%. And we talk about efficacy in terms, but what is most important is that we have a situation where if you are vaccinated, you're less likely to be hospitalized, or if so, to enter the ICU. So I think that is encouraging news so far, as far as especially with the Delta variant is concerned. So again, our biggest challenge remains to roll out those vaccines that we have in as quick a manner as possible. That's our best chance.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you all very much for joining us this morning. I want to thank my colleague, Senator Lyda, and again take the opportunity to wish you all very happy Independence and to have a safe Independence weekend, time for rest and reflection. Please stay safe, remember your 3 W's, and we work together going forward.
But we know that you're registered, that you're in. Yeah. Yeah. We know that you're registered and that you're in, but we're just not getting your audio. Because look, the other guy is in already. He got in, just press join where it says allow. And how is that not happening? Let me call you back in a minute. Let me just ask somebody something. Okay. You hearing me, Mr. Samuels?
Yes, I'm hearing you. You hear me?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. We're just waiting for David Abdullah to join. He has had some technical, everybody else is joining easy, all the interviews so far, but for some reason he has not been able to link. And there it is. It's so simple. Put in name. Right. Join code. And I'm on the inside here. Actually, look at that. So simple. So simple. Something David is just not doing. No. Watch it.
And do what you need to do.
Watch
Right. You see the screen?
This here?
No, this would have. All right, I do have you up.
Right.
What I'm saying is, they who join should see this, and then they should see themselves popping up in him. So David's supposed to see himself popping up there.
But David say he's seeing himself in a blue box.
Whatever you press to get this screen is what he's supposed to press to get this screen, but at least he's supposed to be popping up inside.
But that's what I'm saying. But how David himself is saying that he's seeing himself in a blue box, but is himself he's seeing. I wonder if his camera settings is on.
That is it. His camera settings is set for some other software.
I don't know if it's software or if he just on. I don't know if he's seeing himself. He might be just stuck on selfie. Or I don't know. I find that strange. I find that very, very strange. How could he be? No, it's not unaware. It's not unaware. It's not unaware. He go under this, get some guidance. Guidance, that's what he's going for. So he's going to try to get in here. He's going to try to get in here. Just a second. One second. Because if Abdullah's sticking, I guess somebody else to come and talk this thing here, man. Hello, Senior Counsel?
He's not home at the moment.
Oh, can I reach him on his cell phone?
You can try. Do you have his number?
I believe I do. 1 second, huh? Let me see, make sure I have it here. If I'm not mistaken. Oh no, I have this home number, but I don't think I have the cell number. But I had the cell number first, and then I got the home number from him. So what did I do with that? Oh, I don't think I have. No, I don't. I don't think I have it. No. I don't think I have it. Just now they're heavy. Let me just finalize with this. I don't think I have it. Shoot, there we go.
Yeah, we're trying to open it in a different, using a different browser.
A different browser?
Yeah, to see if that works.
All right, because okay. But I think what happened is that your camera and audio may be occupied with some software.
Well, we're not sure.
Yeah, check camera settings. All right, we'll give you a few minutes and let's see what happens. Yeah.
I just logged back in again using a different browser.
All right, he just same thing.
Yeah, the same thing is happening.
So,
It says, right, the host has disconnected or we are unable to connect to the call.
the host has disconnected or unable to think to the call.
Tell them just press OK and come back in. You come back in.
Press OK.
Press OK.
Yeah. Happened to me twice while I was on the call.
So it's VMAX call playing.
VMAX call playing.
There's no unable to. The host has disconnected or we were unable to connect to the call. Check to make sure UDP is not blocked in your firewall. Yeah, so maybe there is something that is blocking in the firewall. Laptop.
Oh.
Or it's on a laptop.
Yeah, you're on a laptop. So there's a security thing that they have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a security thing that I think that's exactly what it is.
You couldn't try on a cell phone?
Yeah, you don't need big mix. So you have a subscriber for your firewalls? Because they would then put it up if they see a red flag.
Yeah, we're working on seeing it because disengage it.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
I'll call you back in a few minutes.
Okay, sure. So the disengaging the security thing. So what happened is something to do with the firewall. You see, sometimes you have subscribers, and when they see a red flag, or what they determine to be a red flag, it blocks you from getting access to something. Tell them that. Borrow somebody else's phone.
We'll be tracking our next person phone to hear you.
No, you're right. Take your wife phone. But then the outside man will be tracking the phone. I might throw him off. I could throw him off too. Aha. By chance, could you borrow somebody else's phone? Make it easier?
Well, we try to use another device now, so.
Trying to use. Good. Nice.
Yeah,
Right.
try to see what we could do.
Good. And use the same link. Yes.
Yeah.
All right,
See
good.
what we could do.
Yeah. Right. So they go in and do that there. All right. If you want to go and check on the macaroni pie and come back 5 minutes, you go ahead
Okay.
and check on the macaroni pie.
5 minutes. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
you
I
go
know.
and check on the pie and come back. I want to burn.
Yeah, can I home here cooking?
Yeah, go on. You just go and check on your pie and come back. Let me get this man 5 minutes. And
All right.
let me get started, man. Yeah, check on your pie. Tanku is in a chat here and he just Tanku like is a chat group. But boy, it have a lot of people questioning certain things and it looked like he up night and day trying to answer. Night and day trying to answer because there's a group called Stand Up for Your Country. You in that one?
No.
I know. But boy, this wow. They say PNM finished with this country. I know. Have you checking on the pie? Nice. And that is all David had to do, you know, was go on board the neighbor phone, you know. Outlook.